Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new ProRevenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Drive Like an Asshole? Pay €400. A bit of backstory. I'm a 28-year-old American guy who's been living in southwest Germany for a little over 2 years with my German wife. Though my German isn't the best yet, I know enough to get through daily life out here and understand just about everything when I'm paying enough attention. We live in an apartment with a small parking lot for guests, and each apartment has one garage big enough to fit one car in each. If a guest comes to visit, the size of the parking lot makes it very difficult or near impossible to get in and out of the garage. This is all important later. At the time, I was working at a small cafe about a 10-minute drive from our apartment. My job was extremely strict with working hours, so I was in at 7 a.m. and out the door and in my car at 4:30 p.m. Mondays through Fridays. After about 3 months of working there, I noticed every day on my drive home that the same blue car with a black stripe down the middle was either in front of me or behind me. Every day up until I parked at my apartment to where he would continue down the road. No biggie, I just assumed it was someone with the same type of work schedule that lived in the same small town as me. After a while, I noticed every time this guy was behind me, he would take any opportunity to overtake me. Even though there were always about 20 to 30 cars directly in front of me going the same speed every day, it was a two-way road with one lane going each way, all the way to where I lived. I thought nothing of it. I knew I was a slower driver since I didn't fully understand the German rules of the road yet and didn't want to take the chance of getting a ticket or worse. So I was used to people passing me even though I never went under the speed limit. Anyways, this went on for a while, with him still passing me almost every day, most of time cutting me off, making me slam on the brakes. On one particular day, he was extremely impatient and aggressive, to where he tried to pass me in a one-lane roundabout to where he almost sideswiped my car. He ended up bailing from the attempt and fell back behind me. At this point I'm upset, but I hold back my anger and continue to drive normally. About 5 minutes later, I'm almost home, driving up a pretty steep winding road with very tight turns. As I'm near the first bend, I see a man on a bicycle on my side of the road. So I veer to the middle of the road to give him some room while I pass, and I could see there was no oncoming traffic. At this exact moment, the asshole tries to pass me again, almost hitting me again. I couldn't move to my right or I would have hit the man on the bike. This asshole again bails from his obviously idiotic and dangerous attempt of passing me again and continues behind me. I finally got to my apartment, and when I park, for some reason I looked in my mirror, and who do I see parked behind me? You guessed it, the asshole. He looks *SSED. I don't know what this guy plans on doing, and I have no intention on finding out. So I get out of my car and instantly got to the back of my car and grabbed the tire iron, but keep it hidden so he doesn't see or think I'm going to attack him. He gets out of his car to where I say to him in my broken German, "Can I help you?" He immediately scuffs and asks, "Where are you from, Scheiß Ausländer?" For those who don't know, Scheiß Ausländer is a very rude and disrespectful way of saying foreigner, something like ducking foreigner. I ask him, "Does it matter where I'm from? I live here now." He scuffs again and started a whole speech about how people like you are the problem with this country and I shouldn't even be here. And how you should be thanking me since it's my tax money paying for you to be here. Side note, I came here legally, and between me and my wife's jobs we live pretty comfortably with no government aid. I stop him in the middle of his rant and say, "You don't know anything about me, and what does any of this have to do with you driving like an idiot?" At this point it looks like he's seeing red, and continues to scream obscenities at me for about 30 seconds. He's suddenly interrupted by a loud "Hey," where a man wearing helmet runs right up to him and slams him against his car so hard it cracks his window with his back. I'm so confused for a bit while this man is pinning him to his car, absolutely enraged, screaming at this idiot, and then it clicked to me. This is the man on the bike. I didn't understand everything being said, but it was something along the lines of, "You almost killed me, what is your problem?" The shouting went on for about 2 minutes until the man on the bike forced the idiot into his car and made him drive off. As much as I wished, this isn't the end of the story. About a month goes by, and on a Saturday my wife and I come home from shopping. As we turn into our apartment, parking the only way into our garage is blocked by a car. The car, blue with a black stripe. My wife notices that I'm more upset than I should be about this because we had this situation before with other cars. Everyone that lives in this apartment is very nice and we all have each other's phone numbers in case of an emergency, or for this kind of situation. It's normal to receive a text from a neighbor at least once a week asking if we have a guest parked in the way. We don't really have friends in this area, so it was never our guests parking there. So my wife starts to send out a text asking for whoever has the guest if they could kindly move the car. While she's doing this, I'm calling the landlord, who has told us multiple times if someone blocks our way to the garage to call her so she can call a tow truck. Obviously nobody in our building does this because it's usually not a big deal and a simple text could solve it. I tell her what's going on and give her the details of the car. I hear her let out a sigh. Him again, okay, I'll deal with it, and she hangs up. Apparently this man has given another neighbor of ours problems before. I tell my wife to not send out the text and that we should go get a coffee instead. There's a cafe directly in front of our apartment parking. My wife looks confused but says okay. We're sitting in the outdoor part of the cafe with a clear view of the apartment parking. While I explain to her the whole story of this guy and what he did last month, because I never told her about it before. Eventually I see a tow truck in the apartment parking and point it out to my wife, and she almost can't contain her laughter. I wasn't able to hear much, but eventually the idiot noticed his car was being towed and ran outside his car, which was already on the truck. All I heard was a lot of screaming but didn't understand anything. The truck driver eventually left with his car. And the butthole was just standing there. He looked across the street and noticed my wife and I watching the whole thing. I smiled and waved, took a sip of my coffee. He walked back inside with utter defeat. I later found out that the idiot is the father to one of the girls who lives in the same building as me. She knocked at my door the next day and asked about the situation, which I explained everything. Thankfully she was very understanding and even apologized for her father's behavior. She also told me this isn't the first time her father's anger got him in trouble. My wife, being the nicest person in the world, made her cookies later that week to show no hard feelings towards her. She laughed, told us her dad had to pay €400 to get the car back. She was actually pretty happy her father got what was coming to him. After that we actually became pretty good friends with her and her boyfriend. Now every time the idiot comes to visit his daughter, he parks his car across the street and won't say a word to me. And as far as know, he drives a different way to home from work. The next one is titled, Landlord Made Me Live in Squalor, Now She's Bankrupt. So here's the story of my previous living situation, which was at best horrendous. I moved into what I thought at the time was a lovely 3/4 bedroom house with a nice offset garage and garden. Perfect for my family consisting of myself, my partner and my 3 kids. Well, a few weeks into moving in, the problems started to arise. We moved in just before Christmas and the weather was awful, torrential rain in fact, which is when we discovered the horrendous leak in my roof. I mean water teeming through the roof, into the walls and down my windows, resulting in all my pots and pans having to sit in my window to collect said rain. We then ended up realizing we had a leak through the roof in my daughter's room after she was awoken by rain dripping on her whilst she slept. She was 2 at the time. We discovered over the course of the time we lived there that the electrics had never been checked and often shorted out. The gas pipes were under regulated minimum gauge, and when the heating was on we couldn't power the gas cooker. Or vice versa, the decking out the back was rotten and when stood on it just snapped. There was a 4 feet drop underneath this. A gas safety check showed that the combi boiler was broken and condemned, but they still refused to replace it. The heating system could never be switched off even on the summer. All of these were reported and promised to be fixed. Over time the patio door hinge, which was snapped, completely fell off and we couldn't close it properly or lock it. Reported and were told it would be fixed, waited months, and even though I was still paying full rent it never got fixed. I eventually got fed up and reported it to the local environmental health team. They came out to inspect the property. They raised concerns over the kitchen floor, which was warped and a major trip hazard. We also discovered from this visit the 4th bedroom, which was in the loft, was illegal due to how it had been done. No insulation, no heating, bodged electrics. So the local environmental health team handed an order over to the landlord to repair all these in a 3-month period. It didn't get done. The council took the landlord to court for breach and she ended up having to pay fines and was given another 6 weeks to rectify. A few of the jobs got sorted when I found my new house to move into. 2 years later, I've just found out through a close friend the council proceeded to complete the jobs themselves. And the landlord has now been declared bankrupt due to this. Her house is being put up for auction. She will receive nowhere near what she needs to pay off her debts and has had to give up her other houses due to bankruptcy laws. Meaning she can't own equity, not even a decent car. If only she'd put the rent I was paying into fixing her house, it wouldn't have gone this far. I'm not sure what's happened regarding the illegal goings-on, the gas and electrical problems that were never properly upkept, but I like to hope she got punished in some way or form. The next one is titled, M ruins park property and gets karma for it. I used to do part-time volunteer work for a local park. It was pretty basic stuff like picking up trash and light security, which was just making sure that people aren't damaging the park property or to report anything shady going on. This park was a fairly big and had a jungle gym in the back of it behind the wall of trees. One day, I noticed that there are tire marks in the grass right where a turnout of the back is. It's fairly easy to make that turn and doesn't come out of nowhere or anything, so I don't know why someone would go through the grass. Also keep in mind it was very muddy and cold, so the tire marks were pretty much cemented in after the grass was ran over. I call my supervisor and they say that we will fix that area when it gets a little warmer out, which it was going to be later that week. A couple days later, when I am near the front of the park patrolling, I notice a minivan coming up from the back of the park. It goes right through the same area of the grass that was previously run over. I couldn't believe I just witnessed it happen. The turn doesn't come out of nowhere and you can clearly see that going straight out will take you through the grass. I start jogging towards the van, waving my arms to get the driver's attention. She stops and rolls down her window, wearing thick sunglasses, and looked at me confused at first. She also had 2 kids in the back. What? Me, excuse me miss, I'm one of the park workers. You drove straight through the grass back there. With how muddy it is right there, the grass gets damaged very easily. Okay? She clearly didn't care and shocked me a bit that she didn't apologize about it. Me, well, the grass is going to need to be put back down. I understand if it was a mistake, but please be more careful when coming out from the back. I can tell she's giving me a dirty look, even with her giant sunglasses covering most of her face. Whatever. She says rudely and drives out towards the entrance after I say thanks and back away from the van. Fast forward a couple days, me and my supervisor had finished flattening the dirt and putting down new seed for that area in the morning. I was pretty happy with how it turned out, and the grass would look better than it did before once it grew. Later that day, when I come back to patrol the park, I notice the same minivan in the back parking lot. I head over to the jungle gym area and of course I see the entitled mum on a bench looking at her phone while her kids are playing. I was hoping in the back of my mind that she would have listened to me yesterday. But judging from how she acted, I was doubtful. I did a couple walks around the back area, making sure there wasn't any trash, and when I saw her tell the kids it was time to go, I sprinted towards the front of the park entrance. Stand in front of a car at the front and put my own pair of sunglasses on. I keep them in a fanny pack along with some medical supplies and my phone, so that she wouldn't recognize me and stay on the path. Like how you slow down on the road when passing a police officer. Once her van starts coming up, I'm watching in disbelief as once again she doesn't turn and goes right through the same area again that we had just fixed up this morning. I was P*SSED now. I walk up to her van, this time being in the middle of the pavement, and she stops when I approach, rolling down her window and giving me a P*SSED look that I stopped her again. Oh my god, what do you want? Me, miss, you ran over that area again. We had finished fixing it this morning and you just ran it over. So? It's just some ducking grass. You should just make that whole area pavement so it won't get ran over. Me, you can clearly see that the grass is in front of you when you drive up from the back area. It doesn't come out of nowhere and we've never had anyone run over that area. Only you. I had a frustrated tone in my voice, but was still trying to be polite. Her kids in the back were glued to their tablets and weren't paying any mind to me other than when they heard their mum swear. They looked to be around 6 to 8, I think. She gives me one more nasty look before rolling up her window and driving away. Didn't even respond to my last point. Also, she almost ran over my foot since she didn't wait for me to back away from her van before driving off. That was my tipping point. I call my supervisor again and tell him what happened. I could tell he was pretty upset over the phone, but said that he had a plan to stop that area from getting ran over anymore. I meet him on Friday morning and he has this giant boulder in the back of his pickup truck. I instantly knew what we were going to be doing with it. After some work getting it down, digging up the dirt, and wedging it into place, we finished putting the boulder in. I had to admit that it made me sad that there was now this eyesore of a rock there and all our work previously was for nothing. But I was happy the entitled mum wouldn't be running over that area anymore. Later that day, I'm in the back picking up trash when I see the same minivan pull into the parking lot. I know it's the entitled mum and her kids cause I remember their license plate this time. I pay no mind to them, know that she couldn't run over the grass again when they leave now. Later on, I was cleaning some bird poop off a statue when I heard a loud crash sound that came from the front. I run over to when it came from, shocked as I see the entitled mother's van with the giant boulder we put down wedged between her tire and the bumper of her car. She gets out of the van in shock at what happened, swearing and shouting. I personally didn't want to damage her car, just realized she couldn't drive through the grass anymore, so I did feel some guilt at seeing the giant boulder wedged in her car. I came over to the other side to see that the wheel was off the ground slightly and the front bumper wedged atop the boulder. I don't know how she even managed that, honestly. She sees me and immediately gets a look of pure concentrated anger. You. She starts walking up to me stomping her feet. You put that rock there, didn't you? ***hole? Me, miss, my supervisor brought that boulder in this morning for that spot because you were running over the grass. I don't know how you even hit it since again, you can clearly see it coming from the back. I was texting my friend, you idiot. You're going to pay for this damage. Me, yeah, I don't think so. She fumes and heads back to her car. She has her 2 kids get out and go sit at a nearby table, both still playing on their tablets. Though got back in the car and is on the phone. A few minutes later, she tells me she called the police and that I'm going to be arrested for intentionally damaging her property. I admit I was a bit worried at what story she gave them probably wasn't the truth. So I called my supervisor again. He got here even before the police did. I saw him laughing as he pulled up and saw the situation. He walks up to the entitled mum and explains who he is, and she starts yelling at him about how she's going to sue and have him and myself arrested for the damage. A few minutes later the police pull up. She tells them that we intentionally put that rock there to damage her car. But we explained to the officers that she had drove over that grass several times, even after we had fixed it, and we put the boulder down to keep her and others from driving through the grass. The police got some more information from us and told the entitled mum that we were in the right to put the boulder down and aren't liable for her poor driving. Frustrated tells her kids to get back in the car and actually starts to back out off the boulder. My supervisor, the officers, and I all watch as the boulder is scraping up the bottom of her car as she backs out. Once off it, her front bumper slams on the pavement and is now hanging down off the left side. Something under her car was also touching the pavement, which was apparent as she started to drive away, and the sound of something scraping against the road could be heard. The officers stop her and tell her that her car is now not safe to drive on the road and she needs to get it towed. My supervisor and I went home shortly after, smiling and laughing at what had happened that day. I can safely assume now she won't be going over that grass anymore. The last one is titled, Bully Him? He'll knock your lights out and give you a lifelong scar. So this took place over 40 years ago, while my dad was in high school. The first thing you should know was that my dad had to move around a lot. He moved to a new school almost every year. In 9 years, grade school, end of high school, he had been to 9 schools, 5 countries, and 3 continents. Because of this, my dad was always the new kid, so he was bullied a lot. Not just teasing bullying, but physical, violent bullying. And he was always ambushed by gangs of kids, 3 or more, not just 1 versus 1 fights. So my dad had to learn to protect himself. He moved around too much to take martial arts classes. So instead, he just decided to become really strong. The way he would do this was by punching hard objects. He told me that one time while he was in Jamaica he would harden his fists by punching a copper or brass, can't remember which bell, that was in a building near his home every day after school for half an hour. The result is that now my dad can punch through walls. I've seen him do it. Anyway, onto the revenge story. The actual story: one year in high school, when my dad was in England, there was this one kid, Jack, in his mechanical workshop class who would bully him all the time. He would call my dad racial slurs, spread rumors about him, taunt him, trip him, push him, and generally be a huge jerk. However, whenever my dad tried to retaliate, the workshop's teacher, Mr. Work, would tell my dad off and tell him to stop bullying Jack. There was literally one day where Jack called my dad the N-word at the top of his lungs so that everyone in the class could hear. When my dad threatened to punch Jack, Mr. Work stepped in and gave my dad detention for threatening Jack for no reason. This continued for the whole year. Jack would do something to my dad would try to retaliate, and Mr. Work would punish my dad. Then one day it all came to a head. It was at the end of the year, the day before final projects were due for the final grade. My dad was using one of the saws to complete his project. What he was doing would take the rest of the class. Jack also needed the saw, but my dad got there first and would need it for the rest of the class. So Jack was screwed if he didn't get the saw. However, the workshop has an unofficial first serve first come rule, so Jack was out of luck. To be honest, it was Jack's fault. He had been goofing around the whole 2 weeks the class had to finish the assignment. He had left it to completely the last minute, and that's why he needed the saw last minute. So Jack, instead of trying to scramble to put together a last-minute project when he saw the saw was being used like a normal person, he decided that my dad had no right to use the saw. He pushed my dad out of the way and tossed my dad's project on the ground. When my dad pushed him back and asked him what the heck he was doing, Jack got P***SSED off because my dad retaliated and punched my dad in the face. Pause. It is important to note that this was the first time all year that Mr. Work hadn't stepped in to defend Jack. My dad thinks that Mr. Work wanted to see Jack beat my dad up, as my dad saw Mr. Work just watching the fight play out from his desk, smirking the whole time. Unpause. My dad stumbled back from the punch, and he snapped. Jack was not a good fighter, he telegraphed that he was about to throw another punch. My dad never let that happen. He unleashed all the anger that had built up over the year. My dad hit Jack with a WBA-worthy uppercut. Jack literally went flying so far he practically grew wings. Jack traveled a good 4 or 5 feet backward and landed in a pile of scrap metal. He was knocked unconscious and he got a huge crescent-shaped scar on his right cheek. It required somewhere between 6 to 12 stitches, and he was scarred for life. As for Mr. Work, the look on his face was priceless. He had let the fight between my dad and Jack happen because he thought my dad would be beaten up, but it resulted in Jack being scarred for life. Mr. Work was later fired for allowing this fight to happen, and when my dad and a few of his friends told the principal how Mr. Work had overlooked all the bullying throughout the year. Mr. Work was also almost sued by Jack's family, not sure what exactly they were suing him for. And it doesn't end there. My dad saw Jack in a grocery store 2 or 3 years back. He still had a huge scar on his face. When Jack saw my dad, he nearly peed his pants and tried to hide in the aisle. My dad decided to have some fun and chased Jack around the store. Jack eventually hid in the bathroom and didn't come out. Thanks for listening.